Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us at Hopeful Moments 1. Today, we are going to explore an interesting story full of valuable lessons. This story reflects the negative consequences of implementing an overly aggressive cost-cutting strategy without considering other important factors such as convenience, work efficiency, and employee satisfaction. In the business world, sometimes cost-saving measures do not always lead to positive results, and today's story will clearly illustrate this point. Clint, a manager who was determined to minimize travel expenses, decided to implement a lowest possible price policy for all flights and car rentals. While this seemed like a reasonable approach at first, as it helped save the budget, Clint overlooked other factors such as time impact, comfort, and especially work efficiency. This extreme cost-cutting led to numerous unforeseen problems, such as missed flights, inconvenient car rentals, and, most importantly, disruptions to the work schedule and customer satisfaction. In the end, Clint realized that pursuing the lowest price does not always provide long-term benefits. The issues that arose not only consumed more time but also generated additional unofficial costs, such as having to rebook flights, rent hotel rooms overnight, and deal with the inconveniences of using budget services. These consequences forced Clint to cancel his extreme cost-saving policy when he realized that a strategy based solely on lowest prices could do more harm than good. Today's story will take you through a surprising situation. Clint, who insisted on implementing the lowest possible price policy for all business trips, ended up facing a series of problems brought on by this policy. Despite his initial intention to save costs, the inconveniences and unexpected issues he encountered made the actual expenses much higher than a typical business trip. From delayed flights and car rental issues to safety concerns at hotels, all these problems not only affected the work but also decreased the efficiency and morale of employees. If you find this story interesting and filled with meaningful lessons about finding a balance between savings and effectiveness, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring valuable lessons and memorable moments in life with us. Let's learn together and draw valuable insights from each story. Before mobile phones, modern technology, and security systems like TSA became an integral part of daily life, I worked as an administrative assistant at a company. Back then, administrative work was very different from what it is today. Without the help of technologies like smartphones or management apps, everything was done manually, from recording information to communicating with other departments through landline phones or letters. Anyone who has worked in such an environment can truly feel the vast difference between how we work today and how things were done back then. Meetings, information exchanges, or organizing work took much more time and effort. In fact, if urgent information needed to be communicated, people had to wait for a letter or fax to arrive, which often created significant delays in work. Today, with the explosion of technology and handy electronic devices, everything has changed completely. With just a tap on the screen, we can exchange information, schedule meetings, or track work progress in real time without worrying about distance or time. However, looking back, I realize that in the world we live in today, we have gradually forgotten the feeling of those days of manual work. It has been such a huge change, and sometimes I wonder if we have lost something in our human connection due to our over-reliance on technology. In this context, I was fortunate to work under the leadership of Ray, my manager. Ray was not only an excellent manager but also a person with a great sense of humor. He always knew how to create a relaxed and enjoyable atmosphere in the department, making employees feel comfortable and at ease during stressful workdays. More importantly, Ray had a very unique leadership style. He didn't just stand above us as a manager but was always ready to listen and share the challenges we faced in our work. His openness and friendliness helped create a workplace where everyone felt respected and valued. When I joined the company, Ray took the time to clearly explain my role and responsibilities within the organization. While my work could involve assisting the entire office, Ray was the one directly responsible for me. This was very important to me because it not only helped me better understand my work relationships but also established a clear connection between him and me. So even though I worked with other departments in the company, I always knew that I was working for Ray, and he was my direct supervisor. The clarity in this relationship not only helped me do my job more effectively but also gave me peace of mind, knowing where I needed to report and who would be there to support me when I faced difficulties. In summary, my time working with Ray was a memorable and meaningful period in my career. The way he led and created a positive work environment taught me so much, not only about work but also about how to treat the people around us. Compared to today, technology may have changed a lot, but values like leadership, respect, and the ability to create a positive workplace are still crucial in every organization. One of the important things Ray emphasized when I first joined was that I needed to understand the company structure and distinguish between tasks I needed to perform for Ray's department and tasks for other departments. While I might have participated in general tasks, it was undeniable that Ray was the primary decision-maker and had a significant influence on my daily work. This not only helped me clarify my work direction but also made me feel more confident in performing my assigned duties. In another department of the company, Clint, a manager responsible for overseeing a different department, was my colleague. While Clint and I worked in different departments, we still had to cooperate and communicate in specific situations. Clint and Ray may have had different working styles, but both had a significant influence on the company's operations. The relationship between departments was sometimes very important, and although I didn't work directly with Clint, I still needed to be aware of the factors related to his work, especially when there were projects or tasks that required cross-departmental collaboration. Flying from our main office to satellite offices within a day or two is a very common and frequent activity for those working in both departments. In the company's work environment, business trips are an essential part of daily operations, and traveling between offices to attend meetings, discuss projects, or resolve work issues is completely normal. For us, these trips are not only work-related but also opportunities to connect and build relationships with colleagues in other offices, creating networking opportunities and enhancing work efficiency. As an administrative assistant, I am responsible for organizing, arranging, and ensuring that all trips follow the pre-approved procedures. Each business trip must adhere to strict guidelines, from booking flights and arranging accommodations to renting transportation upon arrival. All these tasks must be executed accurately and promptly, as the success of business trips depends heavily on thorough preparation. These duties require good organizational skills and also require me to maintain constant communication with stakeholders, updating them on any changes or new requests from those traveling. In cases where someone needs to change their schedule unexpectedly, company policy dictates that they are responsible for making the adjustments themselves. This means that employees must find their own way to change flights, hotels, or transportation if something goes wrong, rather than relying on me or the administrative department to handle these changes. This principle is in place to ensure that the company does not waste time or resources, while also encouraging employees to be more accountable for their schedules. Therefore, self-managing changes is a critical requirement, especially in emergency or unpredictable situations. However, Clint, a manager from another department, seemed unable to understand or accept this policy. Despite being clearly informed about the procedures and rules for changing schedules, Clint still expected that sudden changes would be handled and resolved easily, without having to manage them on his own, as the policy stated. It seemed that Clint did not realize that each change could affect the work of other departments and could create unnecessary inconveniences. This lack of understanding not only increased my workload but also created complications in maintaining established processes. This clearly reflects the difference in perception and work approach between Clint and those of us who work by the rules. While I and many others in the company always try to follow regulations to maintain work efficiency, Clint tends to disregard these principles, which sometimes leads to stressful and inefficient situations. At one point, Clint, who was always looking for ways to cut costs for his department, made a bold and somewhat extreme decision to reduce travel expenses. He introduced a policy called the lowest price possible for all business trips in his department. This policy required all employees to select the cheapest flights and travel services available, regardless of the convenience or effectiveness of the trip. According to Clint, the sole goal was to save money for the company, even if it affected the quality and feasibility of business trips. The flights Clint chose were always the cheapest options, often departing at 5 a.m. and returning at 11 p.m. These flight times were far from ideal, but they met Clint's cost-saving criteria. Early morning flights often had fewer passengers, but this also meant that travelers had to wake up very early, making the start of the workday tiring and inefficient. The late-night flights at 11 p.m. could be cheaper, but they also meant that passengers would be traveling exhausted, impacting their health and mindset for meetings or work the following day. However, Clint did not take these factors into account. He focused solely on minimizing costs, without considering the potential problems that could arise, negatively affecting work and important meetings. As a result, Clint failed to recognize the risks and inconveniences that came with his decisions. A few weeks after the policy was implemented, Clint prepared for a business trip to a satellite office for some face-to-face meetings. This was the moment when the lowest price possible policy would truly be put to the test, and Clint would face unexpected consequences from his choices. He selected a flight that departed at 5 a.m., following the rules of the policy. However, a series of incidents began to unfold as Clint began his trip. Upon arrival, Clint discovered that the company's car rental service, which was the cheapest option, did not hold cars at the airport, meaning he had to take a shuttle to another location to pick up the rental car. For Clint, this seemed like a small inconvenience, but it began to add complexity to the trip. However, the reality was that the shuttle service did not begin operating until 8 a.m., while Clint's first meeting was scheduled to start soon after his arrival. This caused Clint to miss one of his important meetings. This situation is a prime example of how excessive cost saving can lead to unforeseen consequences. Although Clint saved money for the company by selecting cheap flights and rental car services, the inconvenience and time lost due to these issues caused far greater damage than the savings. Missing the meeting, as well as the stress and fatigue from traveling at inconvenient times, reduced work efficiency and negatively impacted Clint's reputation within the company. Although the client understood that Clint had encountered an unfortunate issue, they remained firm in refusing to reschedule the meeting for the day. However, they agreed to rearrange the meeting for the following morning, providing Clint an opportunity to resolve the situation and continue with his work. At this point, Clint realized an important issue: he had to decide how to handle the next steps. One option was to fly back and then return the following morning, but this would create significant inconvenience in terms of time and cost. The second option was to rent a hotel room overnight, ensuring he had enough time to rest and prepare for the meeting the next morning. Clint decided to choose the hotel room option, as it seemed the most reasonable choice to ensure he could attend the meeting on time. However, according to the lowest possible price policy Clint had applied to all his business trip expenses, I had booked the cheapest hotel room for him. Although it saved costs, this decision led to a series of unavoidable inconveniences. The hotel room Clint received lacked the security he expected, making him feel uneasy and insecure. This could affect the quality of his rest, which was crucial for him to relax before the important meeting. Moreover, as Clint complained, the hotel room had little friends with many legs, a metaphor for insects like cockroaches or ants. This clearly worsened Clint's experience, as he had to endure a restless and uncomfortable night. The lack of quality service made the initial cost-saving effort futile, as his dissatisfaction and discomfort that night reduced the effectiveness of his business trip, especially since he had to attend an important meeting the next morning. The following morning, Clint continued his journey, but unfortunately, he discovered that his rental car had been broken into overnight. This was an unfortunate situation, as these unexpected problems made the work even more stressful and chaotic. Clint had to wait for the police to handle the situation, and this delay caused him to miss the meeting for the second time. These consecutive issues not only disrupted Clint's plans but also dealt a severe blow to his work preparation. In fact, missing the meeting was a serious consequence for any business trip, especially when that meeting could impact project outcomes or client relations. Despite facing these ongoing difficulties, Clint managed to convince the client to reschedule the meeting once again. This demonstrated Clint's persistence and relentless effort to maintain a relationship with the client, despite the obstacles he was facing. Clint's determination led him to decide to take a flight back the following day, although this meant he would have to continue adhering to the lowest possible price policy I had applied when booking his flight. Thus, I had booked Clint on a flight departing at 11 p.m. and returning at 5 a.m., even though his meeting was scheduled for midday. This would certainly make Clint endure a tiring night flight and then wake up early the next morning, affecting his health and mental state. This time, there was a slight stroke of luck, as the cheap rental car Clint had booked was available at the airport, saving him time and sparing him from the inconvenience of shuttle service. However, despite these more favorable factors, I still couldn't help but feel that this extreme cost-saving policy had caused Clint numerous problems and inconveniences throughout the business trip. Therefore, while Clint had some success in addressing the arising issues, continuing to apply the lowest possible price policy seemed like a less than optimal solution in the long run. In fact, this policy had caused Clint to face many unnecessary problems and created inconvenience not just for him but for others involved. The key lesson here is that sometimes excessive cost saving can lead to unforeseen consequences, and considering quality, convenience, and work effectiveness is essential in any financial decision. At this point, the lowest possible price policy Clint had applied caused serious consequences for the company. While the initial goal was to save costs, the reality showed that this policy ended up costing the company twice as much as regular business trips. The additional expenses from managing and organizing the trips became very time-consuming and labor-intensive. I, the person responsible for organizing these trips, had to spend hours calling hotels, motels, and rental car companies just to ensure Clint could adhere to this policy. This not only became financially costly but also disrupted my work, preventing me from focusing on other tasks. Another factor that made this situation more serious was the time Clint lost in transit. The early and late flights not only made him tired but also affected his work performance. As a result, despite saving on costs, Clint had to endure many hassles and inconveniences, while the costs related to emergency changes caused significant waste. Nonetheless, after experiencing a series of unexpected incidents, Clint eventually made it to the meeting, and the early morning flight seemed like the only option for him to arrive on time. However, I don't know exactly when Clint realized that this policy wasn't always effective. Perhaps, at that point, he realized that saving costs might not be worth the inconvenience it caused. After 2 days of trouble, Clint finally found a way to change his flight. He began to notice that peak-hour flights, although more expensive, offered much more convenience. Instead of continuing to endure late-night and early morning flights, Clint decided to switch to earlier flights, even though they were pricier. This showed that Clint had started to realize that sometimes spending a little extra could provide more long-term benefits, rather than pursuing extreme cost saving without considering efficiency and convenience. Another notable change in Clint's journey was his ability to change flights and adjust his schedule without my intervention. This showed that Clint had started to understand how the system worked, as well as other available options without relying on the lowest price policy he had originally set. While this proactive approach was a positive development in his work, it also led to an unexpected situation in the next encounter between Clint and me. When I met with Clint again, he tried to fire me, perhaps because he felt that my work had not helped him save enough costs as he had hoped. Unfortunately for Clint, I worked for Ray, who knew the entire situation and even found humor in the difficulties Clint had faced. Ray not only understood the situation I was in but also recognized that Clint had been too rigid in applying the cost-saving policy without considering the long-term impact. Ray, my boss, not only supported me but also laughed at the situations Clint had encountered, because every issue stemmed from Clint's own decisions. Clint was furious, but this didn't matter because I still worked for Ray, who always stood by me. In the end, Clint couldn't do anything, and the company maintained Ray's perspective. Clint could not change the fact that he had created problems for himself and the company by applying this extreme policy. With lessons learned from his experience, Clint had to make some changes to certain policies, especially regarding hotel prices. However, he still refused to completely cancel the lowest possible price policy for flights and car rentals. It wasn't until the accounting department accidentally revealed that Clint had not only found ways to switch to more expensive flights but also knew how to choose upgraded seats that everything became clear. This made everyone realize that Clint wasn't truly adhering to the policy he had set for others. The cost-saving policies Clint had applied not only caused chaos in the company but also highlighted the inconsistency in how he implemented his policies. After some time, Clint noticed a noticeable change in how the employees in his department were handling the lowest price policy he had applied. It seemed that everyone in the department had started to find ways to bypass the rules and intentionally avoid early morning flights, instead opting for more expensive flights, usually at 8 a.m. This wasn't a coincidence but rather a deliberate strategy to avoid the inconvenience of early morning flights, and each time this change occurred, it came with a perk, an upgraded seat. This change not only made the department employees more comfortable but also raised questions about the efficiency and rationality of the cost-saving policy Clint had originally set. This issue not only occurred with the flights but also extended to car rentals. The low-cost policy led employees to bypass cheap car rental options, opting instead for more expensive vehicles for convenience. This not only increased costs but also reflected dissatisfaction with Clint's rigid policy. As a result, problems worsened when meetings, which were previously held at the office, could only take place after hours, disrupting work significantly. This led to clients no longer being invited to the office, but instead, they were taken out for dinners. These dinners were not just casual meetings but involved alcohol, creating a relaxed atmosphere that was much more expensive than the usual way of working. Since these dinners typically took place at restaurants near the hotels, booking hotels became an inevitable part of the process. Luxury hotels near the restaurants were preferred, and of course, return flights were scheduled for the next day, rendering the initial cost-saving efforts meaningless. Clearly, the actual costs of these business trips had risen significantly, affecting not only finances but also operations and relationships with clients. Before long, these issues triggered a strong backlash, and Clint was forced to reconsider the lowest possible price policy he had implemented. In less than a month, all policies related to choosing the lowest price were canceled. This change became inevitable, not only due to the issues that had arisen but also because it clearly didn't offer the long-term benefits Clint had imagined. I was once again allowed to book flights and arrange trips normally, without having to worry about excessive cost-saving demands. This not only eased my workload but also helped the company save time and money more reasonably. As a result, missed flights, upgraded seats, and luxurious hotels were no longer part of the equation, reducing unnecessary waste. However, one thing remained: the client dinner meetings were still maintained, though significantly reduced in frequency and scale. Ultimately, although Clint may have changed his policy, his reputation couldn't be immediately restored. His rigidity and excessive decisiveness in applying inflexible policies led him to lose the trust and respect of colleagues and subordinates. When I decided to leave, Clint still hadn't recovered his image within the company, and he had learned an important lesson about overly applying policies without considering the negative consequences.